A Conversation with John Conenna is sponsored in part by Venus Travel Incorporated in Chicago, the agency that has served the Chicagoland area for over 55 years, which is still owned and operated since 1968 by the Conenna family. Again, Venus Travel, the premier agency for over 55 years, is a proud sponsor of A Conversation with John Conenna. And now, on to our episode. Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with John Conenna. Today, it truly thrills me to have this gentleman back on for a part two. But this time, the part two is not going to be just about him. It's going to be about something that's burning worse than a Canadian fire over there on the south side that keeps coming north to me. The 2023 Chicago White Sox, Ozzie, I'm going to title this Debacle. We have on today Ozzie Guillen JR, host, producer, of course, is host of the great show La Vida Baseball, La Vida Guillien, and of course now the Guillien Grid and the Blackout show. Ozzie, thanks for coming back. And how's it going? Before we get into it, how's it going with you?
It's going great. Couldn't be any happier. It's going great. But it's funny the name you're going to put it. We call it now in the Guillen household the bullet that Ozzie dodged.
Yes.
The higher powers out there always looking out for him, because that's you've explained it absolutely perfect. It's an absolute debacle. There's no other word to explain it.
Now I want to talk about this because I know your time is valuable today. I got to tell you something. Now when I go back and look at it, we're not going to go back too far because I know you're going to really pinpoint me pretty well here today. We're not going to go back too far. I remember that playoff game when Renteria, we were playing the A's, and it was I think a best of three, and you had to win that game. After they had won, I think, the first game, the White Sox, they lose the second game to the A's. And of course, then Renteria is chastised by the media here in Chicago for putting in a pitcher an inning. He would bring in a lefty in the first inning, the second, the third. So now I look back at that game, and I look back at Tony La Russa's first season, and I say to myself, wow, this wasn't too bad. You want to take it? You want to take it from there?
I've apologized to Rick Renteria, publicly on a lot of the media in Chicago and followers of the game and fans of the team might have been too premature on Rick Renteria. You know, we look at Rick Renteria, and he wasn't a manager that wasn't mature in a pennant race standpoint, but neither was his team. This was the first time that his team and himself had been in that type of situation. So the meltdown going into the end of the season and then into the playoffs, it really wasn't a meltdown. It was, you could call it learning curves. And if you look back at it, the move that everyone goes back and critiques, you start Dane Dunning, he gets in trouble, he pulls the first lever, brings in Crochet to kind of stop the bleeding. I think looking back, hindsight of what everyone wants to do in the game of baseball today, might have been the best move. Crochet had pitched like 10 appearances at that point, basically unhittable. And I think that him and the front office were counting on him not getting hurt. They weren't counting on that. So once he gets hurt, it kind of throws a plan, out the window. But that was the end for Rick Renteria, and we've never seen a team respond to the way that they did to Rick Renteria on and off the field. Yes, Tony won 90-plus games, but it was a 90-plus games that a lot of people don't give a lot of credit to. So looking back and you say, was that the season? I think that was the season. I think it was a COVID year, a season that's only 60 games. This team, with the health issues that it had, that's a perfect amount of games for them to play. And it was a season where some teams were really not into it. There was not a lot of scouting reports and a chance where they can really just go out and play baseball and the team be the most talented. This is where people are going to realize, man, Major League Baseball is not sandlot baseball, where you have the best players on the field and you win. It's not pickup basketball where you have the two tallest guys and the guy who's the fastest. You're going to win. This is a game where you have coaching, you have analytics, you have scouts, you have strategy. That all comes into place, not just talent. I still believe the White Sox, yes, they are a talented team on paper, but at the big league level, you cannot win with just talent. It helps, but you need to find ways to win the game. You can't just run the table, especially in today's game where information comes a lot faster. So yes, I believe that the Sox were completely premature on Rick Renteria. But that was also being said, that was the first mistake that you saw from the front office, where 3 weeks before Rick gets fired, Rick Hahn tells the whole world, this is my manager for the future. This is my manager that's going to be here.
Right.
So I am no longer here. 3 weeks later, he fires him. So that's where we started to see all these crazy changes happening that now we all know about.
Again, and I hear Ozzie, I think anybody who would be able to answer this question would be somebody like you. They lose that game. Of course, they lose that game. And I love your hindsight on this about, the shortened season. We didn't see really the real baseball season that year. Do you think the La Russa thing was already in the works? Meaning, okay, the only way, what I'm trying to say is if Renteria succeeds, he's got to take us all the way. Otherwise, we're bringing in Mr. La Russa. Do you think that was already in the works?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that in those 3 weeks and then going into the playoffs, they said, we have a very talented team, but we need to pull the plug on him. They didn't want to make the mistake that the Cubs didn't make. The Cubs took a team away from him. That was a really good team. He got them to the promised land, meaning getting them ready there to kind of just go and go get it. And he gets replaced by Joe Madden. It's a really good team. And then they replaced Rick. I think that they said this guy can take them that far. Knowing Jerry Reinsdorf's track record, it's happened for him, not only in baseball, but it has happened for him in previous organizations with the Bulls, where people say, well, Phil Jackson kind of just already kind of got to coach already really good team that was coming together on its own. So yes, I think Rick Renteria's works were there. And I think their thought process was, this team is so talented. If we get somebody with Tony La Russa's pedigree and his Hall of Fame experience, it's just going to be a turnkey early 2000s New York Yankees, Joe Torre, just sit back, relax, let them do their thing. And they were completely wrong, because this team is not that team at all.
Okay, Oz, and I got to ask you this question because it bugged me. It's bugged me now for 2 years. It's bugged me for 2 years. But I bought into it as the fan. Who makes this comment? I think it was even last year, at the beginning of last year, the White Sox are World Series contenders. And as a fan, you're like, wow.
A buffoon does that. I mean, if a fan does it, you're a fan. If the media does it, you're trying to get clicks. If anyone in the front office or the player says we're contenders, that's where the White Sox made a mistake, where they thought that this division was given to them, where they thought other teams laid on the ground and they weren't getting prospects, and that you didn't have to come and actually fight the fight. They thought this was World Wrestling Entertainment, where Vince McMahon just decides who wins before the match even starts. This is Major League Baseball. And you had teams in the Cleveland Guardians and the Minnesota Twins that they've been traditionally feisty teams, and they took it away from them. They took it away from them even in the 81 season, where Tony, steps down because of medical issues. They had 3 chances to take over the division, and in all 3 chances, they faltered and lost to their opponent. So it's a team that was built on paper and was never really battle tested. And anytime they were battle tested, they kind of fell short. And this season being the biggest debacle out of them all, because even Ozzie Guillen himself said, if Pedro Grifol wins 83 games, he'll be manager of the year. Just because it was that much of an improvement, and people were so over bad Tony that Pedro was billed like to be this huge genius, probably the best press conference ever built in White Sox history, to now being the biggest laughing stock in White Sox history. You play that video just to basically laugh at all the cliche words, and it's a video made for the internet era.
Exactly. I mean, it's just, the first time I interviewed was you last year, when I was hoping Dad was going to get the manager role, and you brought up something that stuck in my thing, but you were 100% correct. That Cleveland series in September, they were 3 games out. And you know what Ozzie Guillen Jr. said to me that night? He said, John, they weren't beating Cleveland. That was Marvin Hagler versus Sugar Ray Leonard, and you're going down. Now we're going to show you. They were so intimidated that night. They didn't even know how to play baseball. That was a great thing by you, and that you basically broke it down this way today too.
No, and the part where you bring somebody in, if you had brought in, and I'm not going to say Ozzie's name, you had brought in Bruce Bochy, Ozzie, someone that has the hardware at home, you can come in and say, we've done this before. I've done this, kind of like Tony, which he never did, but he could have said, I got rings. I fought this battle before. I'll get the guys there to where they need to be. It wasn't like that. Since people were so happy with the Tony departure, it was a big romantic honeymoon between the media, fans, and Pedro, where Pedro got up there and says, we're going to kick your ass. if I can swear in this show.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
I'm saying we're going to do X, we're going to do Z, we're going to do fundamental, there's discipline. He basically laid out his list where you would think that he just got done coaching in Atlanta. And you're like, wait, this guy just got coaching in Kansas City, who's worse than the White Sox. He was only a bench coach to Matheny 1 year when they were the worst. He was the bullpen coach, maybe the bullpen coach. He was a bullpen catcher when they went to the World Series. And when they went to the World Series in 2013, he actually got removed as a hitting coach for Dale Swade in their World Series run. So are we talking about the same Pedro Grifol? Nothing. I'm like, I know that he knows his baseball, but that's a lot of pressure for a guy who's never been battle tested. And here we're thinking, oh, Rick Renteria's not ready to go into a pennant race. So for them to go into the season saying, we're really ready to go into a pennant race, and you're going to bring in a first-year manager, that was very dangerous, because my mindset was, well, you got rid of Ricky because he wasn't experienced, that you're bringing a guy here who, last time I checked, they asked him a question. This is why I'm not a fan of his when he communicates, because he over talks. They asked him about Wrigley Field, and he made it seem like he was, that he had played there for 30 years. Oh, I love Wrigley Field this. And I said, I did the math, and I looked back, and I said, this guy's been here one time as a coach with Kansas City. I have more games at Wrigley Field in playoff experience as a bat boy than this guy does. And he's here selling smoke, but that's who he is. There was the funny question that they asked him on the score. What's your favorite band? And he said Fleetwood Mac. And the follow-up question was, what's your favorite song? And he couldn't name one. Those are things that you're like, okay, is this guy for real, or is he playing a character?
Exactly. And you know what? I had heard, and I think you're going to tell me yay or nay, because you got some inside tracks, young man. I had heard, he makes this comment that basically got him the job. He said, yeah, every time we played the Chicago White Sox, we could see from the other dugout that the White Sox weren't prepared. What? Who are you, Grifol, to make that comment?
Well, the part of we knew what fire they had. I think Pedro Grifol might have been the manager halfway through last year's season. I think that's something that they had in the works. I think that, they knew they probably can control him in a sense of making lineups and work. I'm gonna go out this right there. I'm gonna throw this out there. There's no way in hell Pedro Grifol is better than Ozzie Guillen, number one, because the hardware speaks for itself. There's no way in hell that Pedro Grifol is better than Joe Espada, where I thought Joe Espada would get the job. I've seen Joe, man. I put my mortgage up to that he's a better manager. That's just my personal of what I've seen and knowing. But there's things where for him this year, and you talked about process, and we knew that they weren't ready. There's a moment where the divorce needs to happen. This is a situation that's happening currently right now. It's not Ozzie Guillen, it's not Tony La Russa, it's not Ray Renteria, it's not Terry Bevington. We know Pedro Grifol has told us every single person that he's not, but we still don't know who Pedro Grifol is.
No.
Pedro Grifol today is somebody that looks like he's running for politics, who doesn't want to get anybody mad, who says something today and then says something completely different 2 days later. A guy that has made questionable decisions on bullpen, in-game decisions. A guy that has said, I won't sacrifice wins for development in a season where you're 30 games under 500, which that's very concerning, and the fact that you might be in charge of running the future. So there's a lot of things that he's said that I am giving him a very bad grade for his first year managing. And whoever comes and takes the job next as a baseball operations general manager, dictator, vice president, president, whatever title Jerry wants to give him, which it looks like it's going to be Chris Getz, they need to go in there and really clean house and really look deep down inside and say, what do we need to do to make this organization better? And that's what's more important than whoever's going to be picked at the helm. Because if they put me at the helm, or Ozzie Guillen or Frank Thomas, and they say, hey, you guys are at the helm, but you can't change anything, well, what's the point? Then I'm just a position holder. That's what we need to do. There needs to be change. And the Kenny and Rick era, it ends a 20-year soap opera of episodes with the White Sox where it starts where Ozzie Guillen was the problem. Well, it wasn't Ozzie Guillen. Potentially it was players. Don Cooper, it's not Don Cooper. Herm Schneider, AT. So everyone, it's it got to the point where, okay, they all need to go. And it's a refresher of a new era. Man, I look at it this way. I was 21, 22 years old when the Sox won it in 05 and they went on that 12-year, on that Ozzie's 8-year run. I'm 39 years old now. So it's not abnormal that they stepped away and looking for something newer and fresher, because it's very hard to stay in power that long in any business.
In any business. Ozzie, correct me if I'm wrong, but that month of April, when that season started, you brought up some good points about Grifol. You already saw in that 18-game losing streak or whatever the hell it was, because it was in April, I'll never forget, when you would just turn on your phone and you would say, Chicago White Sox score. You didn't want to watch them. You wanted to know the score. Grifol, you saw the mistakes already of a Grifol of game decisions. Am I wrong?
No panic button. No panic button. No panic button whatsoever. And when you're looking at the comparison, and I already shared a story. Ozzie kind of butchered the story on NBC because I think he was a lot of thoughts in his head, but I'm going to tell the story. So I was in the car when Ozzie got the call from Rick Hahn. Okay, we were leaving Bernardi's, the golf putting shop. They're always a great job with us. We leave. I took Ozzie there because I wanted him to be happy on a really bad day.
What time of year was this? I'm sorry, Ozzie.
This is the day Grifol gets hired. This is the day.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So Pedro. So we found out like at 5 a.m. that it's official. It's Pedro Grifol. Okay, like it's just hasn't been told to the fans, but it's on Twitter. Everyone is like, we know that it's Pedro. Okay. No answer. No call from the White Sox. And at this point now I'm getting frustrated because I think that's unprofessional, meaning it's 5 a.m. Okay, I understand. Don't call him at 6 a.m, but it's almost 1 o'clock. You know, the people are calling him, asking him, hey, can we do an interview? And you can't do anything until it's official. Right. So I was like getting very antsy about literally sending out a tweet and saying, hey, we already know who the manager is. Just make it official. Call this guy and put him out of his misery. Like the quicker, the better. We know this is a business, you know, and he got on the call and he put him on speaker because he wanted to have witnesses of what he's going to say. And I wanted, again, not to critique him, but to learn. You know, not very often do you get to see somebody in a decision making a decision on a company that's worth billions of dollars and a learning experience. Puts him on speaker and Rick does the, you know, it's not us, it's not you, it's us, you know, spiel they usually give you when they're going to break up with you or fire you, or they're not going to pick you. Everybody's been
the corporate BS.
The corporate BS, you know, it's not you, it is what it is. And he said basically the words, we found a young Ozzie Guillen. And I was like, well, ready from by the way, he's saying this without us knowing. He doesn't know that we know who the manager is already. So we're saying he's a young Ozzie Guillen. In my head, I'm like, Ozzie Guillen played in the big leagues. Ozzie Guillen played for the White Sox. He just came from managing a third base coach for a World Series. There's a lot of credentials there that don't match, other than the fact that they're Hispanic and they both speak Spanish. Other than that, and there's not a lot of really good comparisons. So he basically hangs up, tells them, you know, we're going to win multiple championships with this manager, and you're going to be very happy. Those are the words. And he hangs up. I gave Ozzie a little time to sit in his misery, and then I turned to him and I said, I'm going to tell you something right now, and I won't repeat this story or bring it up to you ever again until the chapter is closed out. But either the White Sox just made the best decision that they've made since hiring you, which was probably the wildest, craziest, but a decision that paid off for Kenny, picking you over Cito Gaston, because Cito Gaston is an amazing baseball man and a great manager, and they picked you
all those years, yeah,
and it worked out. Or they're all going to get fired because this is going to be the worst decision in White Sox history, and they're going to get themselves fired for making this decision. Why? Because at the end of the day, it's a very risky decision. They shouldn't have interviewed you. Like it's a decision that's coming of like, this is their hire. And this is before I saw the press conference. Once I saw the press conference, I was like, oh boy, not only did they double down on him, they're tripling, quadrupling, and running down on him. So my question was, if you're, and I was talking to players going into spring training, and I was sensing no sense of urgency. Like, this is not we're going to maybe win. Like, you're going into the season, like, you better win. There's no chance to build. So they were very nonchalant, like they just came from winning a World Series, or you're in a process of a rebuild year. And if you have a crappy April, so be it. So when the losses are stacking up, you can't win a division in April, but I'm like, you can certainly lose it. And I was like, if they're going to be in this pennant race, you want to have some proximity of, right, 5 to 3 games, even from the start. But if you can gain some ground, and they were losing some games there, when you look at the board, Minnesota lost, Cleveland lost, that's a game that you can gain. And they're losing games that you shouldn't be losing. And there was no rush. There was no, like, we need to win tomorrow. It was like, oh, not a big deal, not a big game. And that's what I was surprised, because not only are you managing for this season, but I was like, you're managing for everybody else in the future.
Exactly.
And I went back to 2004 when Ozzie was in the pennant race and he didn't realize that he wasn't going to win. He started making decisions that made a lot of people uncomfortable, a lot of people in the fan base uncomfortable, a lot of people in the media uncomfortable, where he sat Jose Valentin, who's an amazing White Sox shortstop, and played Juan Uribe. And he said, I'm going to extend John Garland, and I'm going to let him go 6 and 7 innings, because he's like, if I'm going to learn, I'm going to find out who the guys that are in this for the long haul and what I'm trying to build, okay, and not make them happy, because I don't care if Carlos Lee gets traded. If that's not somebody that I see myself winning later. Again,
Right.
It wasn't anything personal. It was like, who's going to be, and that's where I haven't seen that from Pedro, especially in April. He did not push the panic button, and I think that he should have.
I got to ask you, I'm going to go back to Renteria for a second, and then Grifol and your dad, and Ozzie Guillen Sr. When I heard that Grifol got hired, I heard, okay, this man must speak the Spanish. Renteria speaks Spanish. Am I correct? I've never heard really Rick Renteria. I mean, he speaks Spanish probably like Dad speaks Spanish. So I thought, okay, they do need this for the Mancadas, the Jimenez.
By the way, Tony La Russa speaks Spanish.
And Tony La Russa speaks Spanish. A lot of people think he's Italian, but he's Spanish, right? Everybody thinks he's like me. But again, the passion, the intuition of a manager like you brought up in 04 and 05. You're going to sit down to Valentin. He even told Frank Thomas before he broke his ankle in 2005, hey, I got Everett Thomas, whoever the DH was that year, the left-hander batter that he had.
Private.
Yeah. So again, your father was not afraid to make moves. I feel, tell me if I'm wrong here in this last 5-minute segment of this, because this has been fantastic. They walked all over Grifol this year.
Absolutely.
They walked all over.
Absolutely. The thing, there's 2 ways I judge a manager: wins and losses. Sometimes you don't have control over that because your players might just be horrible, and clubhouse management and situations. I'll tell you a story. The reason that I was not an AJ Hinch fan, okay, was because AJ Hinch basically made himself a victim when he should have been a manager and gone to the ownership and said, hey, this player and this player and this player are doing this. You either tell them to stop, or I'm going to tell them to stop, or I'm going public. And if the owner or whoever says, and the front office says, hey, we know what's going on, let them do what they're going to do, you tell them, sign an affidavit when this blows up that I was not a part of this clown show that you guys are doing here with this whole cheating thing. Then I can have respect for you, because I say, okay, at least he tried. But the situation of I couldn't control the players. You're the manager, okay? For better or for worse, you are the leader of that team in the clubhouse. So when you hear things like Middleton saying there was people sleeping in the clubhouse, okay, you hear stories of players doing things that they shouldn't be doing in the clubhouse. You hear about this guy leaves the White Sox, what a horrible culture. You hear about that guy leave, what a horrible culture. That is a reflection on the manager himself, okay? Culture, there's no right or wrong culture. The culture that is accepted by players is the right culture. So if your players love eating fried chicken and drinking beer before games, and that's what makes them happy, and that's what gets them to play baseball, there's a World Series team that did that. The Boston Red Sox.
Right.
There's players that you don't have to be button up, super collegey. We're going to rah. You don't have to be that. But everyone has to be on the team rules, on the house rules. Everyone wears a T-shirt when you sit down for dinner. No one comes home past 8. It's the house rules of the clubhouse. Whatever those house rules were, we found out that there wasn't any, which again, some teams do that, was not reflected positively on everyone on the team. That's on Pedro. Okay, that's on no one else. That's 100% on Pedro. So when he says, I'm going to hold players accountable, it was basically him putting a slogan of saying, players basically going out and saying, we're going to do whatever we want. You're not going to hold us accountable. Of him saying, I know what this jersey feels. You don't know what this jersey feels, bro. You didn't play for the team. It's a cliche quote. You don't know. You just came from Kansas City. You might have been to Chicago. Yeah, you know Chicago. Oh, I see the fans. No, you don't. Don't put yourself in this. And that's not just to him. Bruce Bochy couldn't say that unless you really, really, really come in and you try to build your culture. And I still don't know what his culture is. And it keeps getting worse. There's a team fight with TA, and poor TA gets knocked out. And it's not about him getting knocked out, but it's the reaction of all the players around him. And you're like, are they not going to defend him? What's going on? So Those are things like in the world of baseball where you're like, okay, what's going on in here? And then you find out from the firing of Rick and Kenny that they were butting heads, and then there's all these situations inside of the clubhouse that you're like, wow. And then even Pedro then tells, well, now we're going to start fresh, and we got rid of all the bad personnel that we had. You just told me 3 weeks ago that this was a good personnel.
Right.
So do you not know what's going on inside of your clubhouse? That's what's concerning, because sometimes managers know and they keep it quiet and they wait till things happen, which is what I'm hoping Chris gets that, which Ozzie did in 04. I'll give you a quick one. In 04,
Sure.
when we got to Chicago, everyone made Paul Konerko seem like he was the Antichrist when he came on the White Sox. That he was a cross between AJ Pierzynski, Carl Everett. Like, this guy was just uncoachable. He was just made out to be this really bad cancer on the team. And we found out very quickly, within maybe 2 weeks of spring training, that they had completely misread him. And the reason that he was so miserable was the fact that he is extremely intense and all he wanted to do was win. And he didn't like anybody around him that was not on the same page. Therefore, he didn't respect them. Therefore, he was very vocal about it. Therefore, created a lot of clash. Okay. But everyone else, media, front office, everybody made it seem like he was a part of the problem. When in reality, you really looked at it, it's like, wait, this guy wants to win. This is a guy that I want to keep.
This man's a quiet leader, right?
A quiet leader, this is a guy I kind of want to keep. So those are the things that Pedro and his staff, Pedro and his staff need to go in there and do this, need to kind of take an assessment and make changes and do all that. Because this 2023, if Pedro has done one, if he's done one thing right, is the fact that I hope that he has learned, okay, on the what to do and not to do off the field, meaning with the clubhouse, and then obviously get better in in-game management, because it's a little off right now.
Last thing I want to ask, last things I want to ask you. A 49 or whatever it is, I didn't want to look at the standings, that a 49-71 team that he's managing right now. Would you be surprised after all this? And of course, there's some cancers on this team that we won't get into today, but there's some cancers on this team that have made problems to it, and we all know who they are. But do you foresee, would you be surprised on September 30th when this season finally comes to a crashing close that Pedro Grofal is let go?
I wouldn't be surprised. And I really hope that Chris Getz, or wherever it is that gets the managing job, really decides and says, is this a guy that we're going to build our culture around in 2 to 3 years? Because you're not going to win next year. It will take a miracle for you to win next year. It might take another miracle for you to win the year after that. Okay.
Right.
But you need to be able to get your manager in place that builds that winning culture. I always used to say this, even when Rick Renteria was winning games and losing them, I always said, if people said, you're just a hater, I said, there's things in this team that worry me. They have no discipline. They don't listen. They run through stop signs. Yes, they're exciting. They're changing the game. But that's all fun and games until they really, really, really get into a title fight. You can, I'm always a big boxing guy. You get into a boxing ring, it's not like a street fight. You fight a seasoned opponent. You have to listen to your corner. You have to take things. Tony La Russa tried to do it with Germinator. They were up 25-0, and he gave him a take sign. And Germinator basically said no and hit a home run.
Right.
And everybody said, "Oh, Tony's no." That is a moment for your manager to set the tone of, do we have discipline?
Right.
Are we listening to our skipper? Are we listening? It's like when you're at war and there's a leader. Don't cross the line. Don't do this. You're a foreman. There's a leader. It's to keep everyone cohesive. And fans got mad. And now that is a complete debacle. Now we got fans saying, "Oh, well, Moncada's a cancer and TA's a cancer." And I said, where were all these fans when they were saying change the game? These guys were doing the exact same thing. The difference was,
right,
they were having better seasons. They were healthy. But it does not mean that you can win and win consistently, because in baseball, talent will only take you so deep. You have to build a winning culture. That does not mean winning with a W, meaning in the stands. It means, is a player just as excited because he hit a sacrifice fly to drive his teammate in that he is because he hit a home run? Are we putting the jersey in front of the jersey number in the back? That's the mentality that you need to build around. And number one, you need the right personnel, because I've seen Ozzie Guillen try doing it with the wrong personnel. And man, he's a great manager, but there's just people out there that, just like at work, people that won't fall in line and they just, they beat to their own drum, and you have to get them out of there. But if you get the right group of guys, you get that mentality in there, you are able to win more games than lose games. And that's what they need to realize with Pedro Grofal. Is Pedro this person?
Exactly.
That a 3-year deal, and it could be another manager, but they need to figure out, is this person more on the culture side of the clubhouse than it is on the in-game management?
Exactly. And last question before we play like a little, I want to play a little short game with you, but
Of
last
course.
question. Last question. If on September 30th, because you know I'm always plugging for him, on September 30th, we find out that Grifol gets hired, does Ozzie Guillen Sr., Osvaldo Guillen, get a call and they say, we want you to get this started for 2024. Does Dad take the job I'm talking right now, does Dad take that job?
He will say how many years and how much.
Got it.
If the general manager that's coming in is somebody that Ozzie's never had any contact with, and it wouldn't be Dayton Moore because they know each other well, they might have a dinner, but he would not have a formal interview. When Ozzie interviewed, which is a fiasco, it was Haber, assistant GM, Chris Getz, Ozzie made him a Major League Baseball player, brought him up to the big leagues when he was looking for a second baseman. Daniel Zine, who used to be Ozzie's video guy, he used to make video in Ozzie's run. Now he runs, front office stuff, and Rick Hahn. And that was the interview. And you're sitting these four guys talking to Ozzie about White Sox baseball. It doesn't, and here's the part where it's interesting. Ozzie, because we get to compare interviews, because Ozzie interviewed legitly, like Ozzie's only legit interview that he's ever had, other than the White Sox interview, which kind of like awkward because it was just him and Kenny. He went through the interview process with the Padres, where he met the whole organization. He met strength conditioning coaches. He sat in a Zoom with 20 people firing questions at him, talked to AJ Preller, talked to the owner. Ozzie went through the interview process with the San Diego Padres and was one pick away from being named the manager. But he went through that interview process of like 4 days of just interview with everyone in the organization. So we had something to compare it to of what an interview was and what they pretended to make it an interview. I think they'd have to say how many years and how much. From a family standpoint, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to say this here today. White Sox fans might be really mad about this. I'd rather Ozzie manage any other team than the Chicago White Sox.
I can't blame you for saying that. I cannot blame you for saying that. This team
is so far in the hole and in trouble that anyone that comes and takes it is going to have to do an amazing job. And Ozzie, having the history that he does with his team, he would be blamed for a lot.
Sure.
And the fact that they brought him in and, they basically, the interview was a fiasco interview. Like, I want Ozzie to manage at this point with the White Sox again. I don't want him anywhere near this because we literally call it dodge the bullet. The only person that, again, we had the pros and the cons, and again, managing Major League Baseball is amazing because of the competition. The obviously the money's amazing. Being able to compete again, Ozzie's one World Series away from going to the Hall of Fame. Every manager with 2 is in the Hall of Fame. My mother was the only person that said, I don't want Ozzie to get the job. And I know that if he does, he's going to take it because I think that there's this team, there's something about it. It's faulty. It's got a bad foundation. And now she brings it up consistently. So in that moment, okay, because I know Pedro's not sleeping well at night. He cannot be unless if he's human, he's not sleeping well at night. Ozzie's in such a happy moment in his life. He comes home now and he's like, this team. And I said, why do you care? I said, why do you care? Did you put money on the game? No, I don't gamble. I'll never gamble, man. Okay. You're getting paid the same amount of money in NBC that if you would, you give your opinion and then you get off the mic, but you should not have that feeling. And it's really hard because he still has that White Sox player feeling of this is embarrassing. He literally feels it when he's walking. The fans look at him like, oh, he's part of the White Sox. And we're like, you're not part. This team is not on you. And it's funny to make that connection and be able to do the unplugging.
And I love what your mom said. The foundation here is not good. And it's been crazy. It's been funny to watch Ozzie basically tell Chuck Garfien every night, this ain't going to happen, man. Listen, quick, your time is valuable. I got 5 questions for you. We're going to play a little game because I want to know a little bit more about you. What is your favorite movie of all time that you could watch about 200 times and not get bored?
Man, I'm a big movie about mafia, but I can watch. There's a movie called Tropic Thunder.
Okay.
That if it was made in today's day and age, I think it would get canceled. It's got a lot of great actors, a lot of really, oh my God.
So that's your go-to when you're bored, right? That's your
bored. I watch Tropic Thunder, correct? Or you know what? I don't watch. That's a movie, but I do watch. I watch The Sopranos.
Oh yeah.
7 every night before I go to bed. If I'm not watching a show and I can't go to, I got them on.
You'll get an episode in. Yeah, you'll get an episode.
I'll get an episode in. I watch The Sopranos.
Especially after a bad White Sox game.
Correct. I watch a lot of Sopranos. So yes, I would say that movie, but I would say The Sopranos as a show that I consistently watch.
Okay. Can't be your dad, of course. favorite baseball player, that guy growing up, you got, man, you wanted to emulate.
I love Frank Thomas, but I was too close to Frank, so I really didn't see him like access wise. My favorite player growing up is named Juan Gonzalez.
Okay,
Igor,
I remember him, Texas
number
Rangers.
19 for the Texas Rangers. I was a huge Texas Rangers fan growing up. Actually, funny story, the gentleman who's now the general manager in Anaheim, his father was the head clubby for the visiting side of the Texas Rangers. So every time, ever since I was a little kid, we'd get there and he'd have boxes of like all the giveaway stuff and like a care package.
Wow.
In Arlington, the stadium was next to the water park and Six Flags was right next to it. And they had Nolan Ryan. And one of the places that we made a trip was we'd always go to Milwaukee because it was driving distance. But if we flew somewhere, we'd always go to Texas because they had the water park. So I grew up going to Texas very young. And as that team got better and young, and I'd have all this memorabilia from the Rangers, that I literally became a Texas Rangers fan, and then I became a Igor Gonzalez fan. So yeah, I have a lot of Igor stuff.
Remember him well. Okay, that one guy you want to interview, and it can't be me. The one guy you want to interview, who would it be that you, before it's all said and done, because you've done so many.
Man, I would love to interview. I would love to interview President. You know what? I could, dead or alive, there's this thing. I'd love to obviously interview any president, but I think in baseball, I would like to interview Jerry and not let Jerry BS me. That would be a big one.
A good one. Jerry, we're talking Jerry Reinsdorf.
Well, I'm just saying, just because I have a really funny relationship with Jerry Reinsdorf. And it's one that it lives like in an IKEA box. I talk to Jerry on a consistent basis. We text each other, everything in life but baseball. I don't ask him any baseball questions. I don't ask him how the team is doing. I don't talk to him about moves. I don't talk to him about anything baseball. If there's an idea that I have from like a marketing standpoint, I'll bring it up to him. But we talk about family, business, life lessons, but no baseball. It's like an unwritten rule that we have. And I see him like a grandfather figure, business figure. And again, you realize later in life that people that you admire have flaws, but there's a lot of things that I would like to ask him in a deeper level questions that I would. And then currently right now, I would love to interview Jeff Luhnow, the Astros general manager, just because I have this obsession that if I was Jerry's grandson, that's who I would have called for the job.
Okay, great. You're up front, right on the point. All right. You told me about the Sopranos, and what's the go-to food, your favorite food, that junk food that you like?
Man, junk food. I love cheeseburgers. I'm a cheeseburger guy. That's there's no cheeseburger that I've never been able to turn down.
Okay, great. Okay. In a short paragraph, not that you have to write it, but in a short paragraph in your mind, what has Ozzie Guillen Sr. meant to you, your father?
Man, to me, wow. Well, it's interesting because Ozzie Guillen, there's a complexity, and that's what we call him, like Hawk Harrelson, because there's Ken and then there's Hawk. Ozzie means several things in different spectrums. Obviously, the father figure of Ozzie means a lot, because to be able to do what he has to be able to make the decisions that he's made in his life for the better of his family, deciding to turn pro at 16, playing baseball, coming to the United States in a time where, there was no bilingual TV. It wasn't a normal thing to do. Take a whole family and a whole generation from nothing to be able to get me where I'm at now, education-wise, and who I am and the future of my kids and whatnot. That, from a personal standpoint, I admire my father with any flaws that he's had ever, because it's a true immigrant story of, I think he relates a lot to people in the United States of, my grandfather came here with nothing. My dad came here with nothing. My dad was able to do it with baseball, but that's what I admire with him as a father, as a person, as a Venezuelan. Baseball wise, great player. One of the best to ever do it. Amazing manager. I think judging Ozzie Guillen, when you're around him, he is like, I call him like Rain Man. Baseball is his second nature. He's very good baseball. If you ask Ozzie about anything else outside of baseball, he might give you a weird random answer. Okay. Not. Fair. He goes, "Oh, you think you're smarter than me?" I said, "Dad, I'm a million times smarter than you." I said, "When it comes to baseball, you're a genius. Anything else, I'm probably going to beat you in a debate. Between the first inning and the ninth inning, or beginning of the game and the end of the game, There is nobody I've ever seen, and I've been around a lot of managers, a guy that can communicate so well with his players, okay, and real communication. Meaning, and I think that's something that he even had. There's a play for the diehard White Sox fans there, and I always ask my dad, like when I was young, like what were you thinking, or why would you go ask him a question? Tom Seaver's 300 game.
Yep.
And Ozzie's going up there to talk to Tom Seaver. I'm like, you're in your first year in the big leagues. You speak no English.
1985, right?
You speak no English. Here's Tom Seaver in New York going for 300 wins, and you have the audacity. And he says that's what leaders do. And then I compare it to Juan Uribe. Juan Uribe used to do the same thing, even with bad English. So I think from him, a leader in the game of baseball and a guy that has done so much for baseball, regardless. And I think even if he doesn't admit it, a big diehard White Sox fan through and through. I think that he will never get over it. I think that it's going to be, to the end of his days. I think if Ozzie goes and manages another team and he even wins another team, I think in his head he's always going to wish that it was the White Sox again. Yep. I really do.
What you see it on the show. All right, I'm going to let you go, but the last thing you got to give me a gift one day. Instead of me giving you a gift for coming on my show, you got to give me a gift. One day I want to be on the Guillien grid with you and your dad.
Whenever. I would love to have you. And again, we're going to need to do this with more time so you can ask these questions, because these are the questions that people want to get answered that are deeper. Yeah. It's the decision when people said, oh, Kenny, somebody asked me the other day about Kenny. I said, that's a hard question. That's 20 years to unpack. I think the guy's a baseball genius. I think he's amazing, but I think like Ozzie, if you stay long enough, you become the villain. And I think that happened to him too. So sure. I think it's very hard to unpack when they're like, what do you think about so-and-so? I said, that's a very, I think he's a baseball genius. I said, I think he's really smart and he did really do a lot of work. So one day we got to sit down, maybe grab dinner and whatnot and talk some more.
For sure. Ozzie Guillen Jr.,
I
truly appreciate. I want to thank you again for coming on. Your insight today was fantastic. And thanks for letting this old Italian guy vent with you.
Anytime. Thank you so much. And a pleasure being on again.
Ozzie, best of the family. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.